My topic today is the unchanging God. The unchanging God. I am the Lord, I change not, God said through the voice of Malachi, the prophet. When we study God, we are talking about the most lofty, deep subject imaginable. Spurgeon said that we cannot plumb its depths, our eagle eyes cannot see its heights. We are awestruck in the presence of God. The Huffington Post said that there are some words that are overused. They're used for all kinds of things and they become common. If I remember correctly, the one that they said was most overused and most common was the word awesome. Everything is awesome. I suggest that we keep the word awesome for God, and we leave it there. The hamburger that you had at Five Guys might be good. It might even be great, but it's not awesome. The Chicago Cubs have many good players. They may even have some great players, but they're not awesome, and they proved that over a period of more than 100 years. Let's reserve the word awesome for God. He is awesome. Praise be to his name. You know, the reason I'm preaching this series on the mysteries of God is so that a number of reasons. First, that we might be appropriately humbled and worship God with more enthusiasm and more joy and more understanding. The other reason is that we might seek him, and the way in which we seek him is through the scriptures. I've decided that in the next 6 weeks I'm going to reread the entire New Testament. So I've begun this week on the book of Matthew. That's the way in which we're constantly being washed by the Word, challenged by the Word. Beyond the sacred page, I see thee, God. So I hope that you're involved in the Scriptures and in constant reading. And then something else, and that is that we want to indeed understand his promises so that we can trust him better. J.I. Packer, in his book on Knowing God, tells the story of a theologian who visualized things this way. As we think of Christianity, he says that there is a path along which people are walking. The people are weary, they are tired, they have various options. But above the path, there are people sitting in a hotel balcony, and they're able to communicate with those who walk beneath them. But the folks in the balcony, and today this is an illustration, all those of you who are in our balcony, just want you to know that you are eminently welcome. But the point is that these people who are sitting up there, they're having theoretical discussions. You know, is it possible for God to exist in three persons? And how is one God in three persons? And we talked about that in one of these messages. And did God die on the cross? It's all theoretical. But for the people who are walking along the journey, these things aren't theoretical. They are very, very practical, because what they're wondering is anybody going to guide us along the road of life? And then when they get to the end, will anyone be there for me? That's the question. So I want us to know that even though we're discussing this theologically and somewhat academically, at the end of the day, join me on a journey, because we're on a journey. Some of you have great heartaches. Some of you have great worries. Many of you are going through financial needs, and you're in the midst of health issues and family issues, and they are so overwhelming. Join us today. We're on the journey, and we intend that these academic comments that are made at the beginning of the service really come down ultimately to how is it on the trail of life. Well, today it is the immutability of God. That means that God is unchangeable. I am the Lord, I change not. I'm going to deal with an issue, though, that most textbooks don't deal with. I read a couple of essays on the immutability of God, and none of them touched really on what I'm going to speak about. Because when you think about the unchangeability of God, don't you ask yourself a question like this? Why the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament? Old Testament, you got stoned to death for heresy, for sexual sins, for working on the Sabbath. New Testament, no such penalties. It's all grace. Come. You're struggling? Well, everybody's struggling. Come. You're welcome. Theologians, some have actually said, look, there are two gods. There's the God of the Old Testament, God of law and judgment. There's the God of the New Testament, God of grace. Come, said Jesus. Is that really true? We're going to have to deal with that. And along with that comes the question, is it safer to sin today because we're under grace? We're not going to get stoned because we live an immoral life. And for those of you who are young people, when I speak about being stoned, I actually mean you have rocks thrown at you, just to clarify that for the younger generation. We don't have to worry about that. We can do whatever we like, and God's grace covers it. That's God's work. That's his job, is to be gracious. How do we reconcile that? Well, what we're going to do is we are going to reconcile that. And to begin with, before we turn to a very key passage, I want to talk with you about God and his unchangeability. First of all, his nature. His nature is unchanged. His essence, can we use that word? Hebrews chapter 1, verse 10, thou hast created the earth, and the heavens are the works of thy hands. They shall perish, and like a garment thou shalt wrap them up, but thou art the same, and thy years shall not fail. There is no shadow of turning with God. Of course his nature doesn't change. We change in our minds, and we change in our body. God